Mhm.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Of course, you know me. My name is Dr. Keith McNally. This is Coach's Corner. I'm here with Andi Buerger because she was on the Question Guy podcast, and we found out a whole lot about her story, her life, her backstory. Such a traumatic growing up. You were trafficked as a young girl, in more than one occasion, and now your life's mission just about is about saving other young kids from the same experience that you went through. Let's dive into that conversation. Let's figure out what's going on with you and how you're helping people one person at a time. Welcome back to the
Absolutely.
show.
Well, thanks, Keith. I appreciate being back. Yeah, well, part of it too is everyone has a past, good, bad, or indifferent. And we also have a choice. We can live in it, which means we're trapped the rest of our lives in that pain and in that grief and in that stage. Or we could live with it, which means it's like a sidearm. You carry that around all the time, or a really big backpack.
Mm.
And we all have a backpack, but the goal is to make it as light as possible. Or we can live through it and say, okay, well, that was part of my life, but it doesn't have to define my life. And I think that's where I fall into line is I decided that if I lived and was successful, then I won. And the evil people that were in my life, they lost because they couldn't kill my future. They couldn't kill all the things that they tried to by doing what they did to me. So to your point is yes, living through it and then deciding to live forward, which is one of my favorite phrases because if we live forward, that means we're moving. We're not stuck in a rut. We're not laying in bed with, eight boxes of, hostess Twinkies or whatever. Yeah, that'd be a lot. But we're moving forward, which means we will make progress, even if it seems like we are a slug on a sidewalk. Because at the end of the day, even the tortoise wins the race. So we will get there with the right support, with the right entities that can help us, and with even just one person, as you and I have talked about, one person listening, not just hearing, can make all the difference in the world.
So let's talk about where this all started. You actually began helping people as a volunteer. Um,
Yes.
when did that start?
That started in my college years. I was really, I don't want to say intrigued, but I really wanted to do something besides just brainiac work. And I plowed through college in 3 years. And so I hustled and I didn't have a job. I had a job later in my third year, but they had opportunities to work with Special Olympic kids. And I thought, well, I've never done that before. But, I have a heart for people that don't have the same physicality or the same mental capabilities that the world says they should have.
Right.
So I started there. I started with Habitat Humanity. As I moved on, went through law school, I didn't have a lot of time because I was putting myself through. So after law school, you found other ways through our church to help to work with youth, and then eventually a couple of side projects, a halfway house, so to speak, for parents that were recovering from addictions. I would watch the kids for the 2 hours while these parents were at a meeting, and there were 10 of them, Keith. Okay, 10 of them under the age of 5 years old. So, anyone out there who's had a 5 year old, multiply that by 10 for 2 hours nonstop. But it was great because I felt like I was helping other people maybe get better at parenting, or at least give them a break to focus on what was needed for them to move forward. And that felt good. It made me feel good. It made me feel like I was moving forward because I had something to give. So whatever came across, I used to write children's music, children's plays for churches. I would do all kinds of stuff just to engage and to be with kids that I felt like needed that non-parent adult that would be safe.
Mhm.
And I'm an aunt to probably millions I don't even know, but, but at this point, that's the best part. So all the volunteer work. Eventually, then I was married before my husband, and so to an abuser. But I did a lot of things to stay out of the house, and one of them was to be a liaison in a senator's office in Southern California and to advocate for children's rights. So I worked really hard to help make things better in the way that I knew how. And maybe it wasn't a lot, but I was always trying. That's why I went to law school because I thought, wow, if I could be a lawyer and save these kids. And then, of course, found out that that wasn't really the justice system that was ideal for that.
Right.
Kids going back to families that were abusive because judges and the courts felt that every kid belongs with their parents, even if they are the abusers. So that didn't help me at all. And I wasn't helping anyone else either. So I went back to business. When I went back to business, then I had a schedule. I had ways to interact with other groups that would say, hey, we have this youth event. Do you want to help? I was always all over those things. What do you call Secret Angel? I think the Secret Angel tree for kids whose parents were incarcerated, and so I would run that program once a year and go help raise funds and things for us to buy the gifts for kids that were in need because one or both parents were incarcerated or the one that was left was working and didn't have enough money for some of the things that kids should have at that time of year. So I was always somehow tangibly involved with youth. And then we moved forward to, later in life when Ed and I started a shelter system.
A shelter?
Mhm.
So where was this?
This was in Redmond, Oregon, where I live,
Okay.
Central Oregon, right in the middle of the state. And so Beulah's Place began as a temporary shelter service program. And we didn't have a building, so we set up a safe house system, kind of like how some people do with foreign students. They come and live with you for a while.
Oh, like exchange students.
Yeah, exchange students.
Okay.
Thank you. That's the better word. And so, being a host family, you could be a host family even if you're a single person, married people, divorced. We didn't care as long as they were vetted and they were safe.
Right.
So we made sure that they would connect up with one of the teens. We would rescue teens off the streets or out of programs or other agencies that needed help. These were at-risk homeless teenagers. They were on the street most of the time, 98% of the time, because they were running from something more devastating, more dangerous at home or wherever they had lived. And they thought, well, if I go to the streets, I can take care of myself, right? A lot of
That's a,
teenagers feel that way.
yeah, but it's a different story. So
Yes.
this exchange student program, this safe house program, flourished into something, yes?
It definitely did. So we had about four safe houses, and so everybody was volunteer. Each of the teens had to sign a contract with us. We went through the two requirements: you have to finish high school, whether it's GED or diploma, it didn't matter. You had to finish, and you also had to acquire and maintain a viable job because you need to have employment if you're going to go back into community and try and rent an apartment or get a car, things that are expected of kids that get raised in decent households.
Right.
So what we did was we made sure that they had the opportunities to achieve those goals, and as long as they stuck with the program, which was 3 to 5 months, because as you can imagine, Keith, that if you stay in a rut long enough, chances of you getting out get less and less every day.
Yeah.
So our goal was to get them in, get them out, but make sure they had the goods to be able to stay independent. And we did that for 14 years, rescued over 300 plus kids, and sent 12 of them to college through the help of the community. And so these are bright teens. They had a lot of troubles that they did not create. All of them were sexually violated in the home. So imagine just that one instance of being violated that way and then having to grow up with that person in your face all the time. I understand that. It's horrible. It's one of the worst sentences in life that somebody can do. And these kids shouldn't have had to do that time. So we felt like if we gave them the choices and the opportunity and the structure with these host homes and these host families, that they would be able to one start looking at how other people lived that actually knew how to love other people or that at least tried really hard to do the best they could to provide something stable,
Mm.
and then we would work with them every day. So at the end of the day, we were recognized by a lot of different leaders and eventually uh, by actually seven members of Congress from both sides of the fence, because exploitation and human trafficking isn't about right versus left. It's about right versus wrong. And it should always be wrong to exploit a human being for any reason, and definitely wrong to traffic any human being for profit. So we were very blessed to have that recognition. We had a 92% success rate of these kids staying independent once they went through our program, graduated, so to speak, and then got back into community. Their first year with minimal to no assistance. That meant no extra calls to emergency services, no tangles with law enforcement, things like that, because they had a plan, they had a purpose, they had a hope. And many of them had already tried suicide, and so we wanted to make sure that they at least had the chance to decide, knowing what they could do.
So that leaves me to the last question, or at least the next question, voices against, and I'm reading the back of your wall here, voices against trafficking. And so this all evolves into something at scale, very large scale.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. So this little nonprofit that barely made six figures in a year in donations, and yet provided cars and cells and mental and mental, dental, medical help, and all of this stuff with a 100% volunteer team. I mean, we had no employees those 14 years, except for maybe the accountant each year that we had to pay to do the books, but no actual employees. So
Wow.
I'm thinking, if we could do that, right, why can't other programs be like that? So COVID happened, post COVID, a lot of nonprofits really felt the pinch because people weren't donating, people were scared, they were locked up, they were just so much going on. And in our particular state, the state leadership was not inclined to think of children and adolescents as important enough to keep shelters open or to allow safe shelter, day shelters. So we had a building. We ended up having to sell it, not for a lot of profit, but we had to get rid of it because Ed and I cannot afford um, the mortgage and the interest rate.
Right.
And the interest rate alone was 1,400 a month. So I don't know how many people out there could do that, but we couldn't.
Right.
Anyway, so we sold it, but as an overlap, somehow in the middle of the night, God spoke to my heart again and said, "More voices. You got to get more voices." And I'm thinking, okay, how do we do that? What do we do? And I had been on some interviews. I had been talking to some people, and I was blessed to meet some very creative, very professional folks in media and other places. And we talked about the issue. They heard my story. They're like, "We want to help. What can we do?" And so we began Voices Against Trafficking. We launched it on Capitol Hill in November of 2019. And we had 200 attendees from the US, Mexico, and a couple of folks from Canada. And we all decided that, working together and sharing information and doing whatever we could to find out what works, what doesn't work in the fight against human trafficking. And so that's what happened. And once we did that, we were on a mission to figure out, what do we need to do? Okay, well, we have a lot of organizations doing maybe internet safety or doing shelters or doing special programs, but what if we were collectively one voice? And so Voices Against Trafficking is like the hub of a wheel, Keith. If you have a hub of a wheel, you want that hub to be strong. But
Mhm.
all the spokes, the more spokes you have, the stronger your spokes are, the further that wheel can go. And I figured we would just start our own human rights movement without actually having to walk.
Cool.
We would just get out there. And so we produced, I wrote a book, we produced another book called Voices Against Trafficking: The Strength of Many Voices Speaking as One. Both of those are on Amazon.com. Both of them give proceeds back, a portion of proceeds back to children who have suffered exploitation or trafficking or abuse. So we started with that. Then we had the opportunity to get a billboard, if you can imagine, in Times Square, New York, Big Apple, right? Big Apple, big billboard. There are some independently owned billboards, and one of the owners gave us a great deal, and we were able to put up a help text number for 2 days, New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, so
Right.
that if somebody was out there and they needed help, they could text. So that was a great opportunity.
That's really cool. But you're also doing something, you also have deeper programs. And like
Yeah.
I think you're starting some shelter homes or something like that, and maybe even a task force. I know that we've talked offline. Can you talk to me about first what you mean by a task force and how that would work and how that actually helps rescue people?
Sure. A lot of details still yet to be nailed down because each of our members have very specific talents. So, besides the books and the magazine and the billboards and the TV show, that we're going to have next year, our goal is to raise enough money off our next fundraising project, which will be a global project, so that we can, number one, we have two what we call teams, groups of people that are highly skilled, whether it's because they're ex-military or retired, homeland or whatever agency or organization gave them those skills.
Hmm.
And we have someone on our uh, charter membership of Voices Against Trafficking who would head that up, because he is also that. He is also skilled in those things and goes all over the world training people in Africa and other places, uh, regarding human trafficking, wildlife trafficking, all those kinds of things that happen globally. So he's agreed to head it up. And our goal is then, okay, once we have the dollars and cents where we can pay for a program that will actually help us either identify where the ring is or identify where victims are, that we will be able to do a very stealth approach to help rescue. And that's what these folks would be doing. And
Wow.
we right now we help actually in some active rescues on a case by case basis, but usually that's more of a calling Homeland Security, or getting the documentation. Hey, we saw this. Here are the photos. Here's the whatever, things like that. Or hey, this person needs to be transported right away because the trafficker has found them out of their hiding place. So we get some of those calls, and as recent as last month. And depending on the situation and what we can do, we'll go through our network of resources worldwide to find, can we help? Can we do something with this particular situation? Or can we nudge somebody to do something with our influence? So that's a lot of communication, a lot of connections, but that's part of what we do. So the task force would be the physical execution of those things that we have been trying to do. The shelter, as you mentioned, I have always found that even in mental health practices, it is rare in a lot of places, including our state, where a victim can get psychosexual help, in terms of, if you've been sexually violated over and over and over again, if you have been so intimately damaged and it has arrested your development. We had a couple of girls that were 21, but they were literally stuck at 12 and at 14 years old, because that's when the brunt of everything happened. And so they go on to have relationships, right, with men who see them as an adult, but they're really operating on a very young level. So that's a very challenging area. I went through a lot of therapy. I voluntarily went into a 2.5 month program for dissociative disorder, which meant I had cut all my emotions off and I operated strictly, from my brain. If I wanted to cry, I'd have to watch a sad movie because I couldn't allow myself to cry for myself. I had to cry for others. And so all of that in a particular, I don't have the exact design yet, but what we do know is that when kids are not even safe to go into a store, a mall, their school, a church without parental escort, that is wrong. They are not they're not being allowed to be children. So, and they are easily abducted, because there are a lot of parents and people who can't do that. They're working. They're trying to economically support a family, whatever that family unit is. So we would like to try and create this pilot kind of shelter system, kind of like we were going to do with Beulah's Place, where there'd be educational, where there'd be other resources that we bring to a person who has identified themselves as being victimized. Instead of, okay, well, here's a list, call DHS, go here, go down the road. What does that person do when they feel dirty and used and like yesterday's garbage, like I did for a
Right.
long time, when they feel like they're not worthy to even look you in the eye? So we want to try that. And if it goes well, as we think it will, then we'd like to put at least one in every state and hopefully continue adding more and more throughout the states that are dedicated to helping these folks for real. You can feed and house and water short term, but then what do you do with the rest of that person's life? How do they go? How do they live forward from there? Can they get a rent contract? And do they have money to put a deposit down? Our kids couldn't even get a bank account because they had no residential history. They didn't have an address. And many of them got beaten and robbed for their cash because they'd go cash their McDonald's paycheck or whatever it was. And, one of our boys was found in a public bathroom and he had been robbed because he had cash in his shoe from his paycheck. And it's vicious, especially for these young people. So, yes, so the shelters would be another one. And then we have goals for a national educational program, two actually, but one in particular is about situational awareness regardless of what kind of home you live in. So the Be Safe Be Aware program, we're in partnership with Brian Searcy with the Paratus Group, and they've created this curriculum. He is a retired colonel from the U.S. Air Force and does amazing work with, okay, whatever your home unit is. It could be single person, it could be two parents, it could be grandma, it could be foster, it could be a bunch of kids or one kid or no kids. But this is how we're going to help you protect yourself from crime in general, but especially if it's trafficking, if it's bullying, if it's assaults, if it's any kind of sexual violation. And 4 minutes a day with this program, 5 days a week. How many people can afford 4 minutes a day? Right? And in 21 days, have a habit. And in 90 days, have a lifestyle of awareness that will help prevent the whole issue of abduction and trafficking and abuse. Because that's the way to cure those evils, is to not let it happen in the first place. Okay. Now, are we going to save the world? Probably not. But can we save a good portion of it? Absolutely. If I could be saved, anyone could be saved.
I'm speechless because that's just wonderful and beautiful and all wrapped into a perfect little package. And all I can say is I'm in. If you need my help, whatever I can do, you know how to reach me.
We'll
And
take
so,
it.
so let's change the world or the piece of it that we can, and
Absolutely.
just make it a better place because I know, and I live here in Virginia. And when I go to the store, every once in a while, it's kind of, and I always thought that conversation can't be happening. They're actually talking about somebody who's been abducted or just missing at this point. And I'm
Right.
thinking, and we're not talking about just kids, we're talking about adults too.
Absolutely.
And so I'm flabbergasted, and I feel that I don't I don't even know what to do. And I can't believe it's the conversation I'm hearing it. So I'm in. Whatever you need from me.
Okay. I love it.
Um,
Now, if everyone else listening will be in too, then we can really do some damage out there. But let me just give you a super, if I do, we have time for two super quick examples. Okay.
please.
So first one is, and this is not, it's not Walmart's fault. It's just a big box store. So a woman was in Walmart. Brian shares a story from our Be Aware, Be Safe program. She was a young woman in Walmart with a basket doing shopping and kind of felt like somebody was following her. And there was a gentleman also with a basket, nothing in it. But it seemed like wherever she was, he managed to be, or he managed to be coming right around, the other side of that aisle. And so her husband wasn't with her in that area, but she got a little nervous, so she kept trolling around with her basket and looking for her husband. Saw him, called out to him. He came and told him. She told him that I feel like there's this guy following me or something. So they went to check out. The same guy went to check out. She checks out and they pay for their groceries. The guy that was following her didn't have anything in his basket and pretended to be running something by, through the what do you call this automatic, checkout.
Yeah, the self-checkout. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very technical, you can tell. But anyway, so he leaves. He didn't buy anything. He doesn't have anything, and ended up dropping the shopping cart off. And the husband and wife went on, but they mentioned something to the store manager because that's an adult, as you said. But even in a grocery store, okay,
Mhm.
now imagine how many people take their little kids to grocery stores and they lose track. Well, go play with the toys, honey, and I'll be right over here in the vegetable section, right?
Right.
Don't do that. Please don't do that. The other very quick example is it happened right just outside of my town here in Redmond in Bend, Oregon. A lot of people know that because there's a lot of golf and a lot of mountains. And when Brian came out to do a program live for us at a shelter, a very well known shelter out here, they had a young girl that had come into the shelter, a low barrier shelter, no questions asked to show up, probably 14 years old. So the night before Brian flew in, the director had gotten his number. They had talked about some things because the director did not know exactly what the girl's story was, but had a feeling that maybe she was in some kind of trouble. So Brian gave them direction. They were able the next morning when we showed up to assess the situation, to call law enforcement. They got there as we got there. They were interviewing the young girl. And as it turns out, after we gave the presentation, the director told us she was actually on the missing children's list. And she indicated she knew where other girls were. So this was probably an abduction. Somehow she got loose or escaped, or we're not quite sure what happened. We did not get those details. But because of awareness, because of just a simple conversation, at least one was saved and probably more because if she knew where the other girls were, I'm sure action was taken. So again, awareness and prevention.
Andi, thank you so much.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Thank you for this conversation. For those of you in the watching or listening audience, get involved. We need this video to go viral, and I'm going to make it happen. Until next time, I'll see you later. Take care.